The rancher was still a virgin at 34, until a widow slept in his bed for 3 nights. Samuel woke up before dawn, as he had every day for as long as anyone could remember. The sky was still dark, but the chill of the early morning made him pull his worn jacket tighter around his shoulders. Out on the ranch, the quiet was absolute except for the distant lowing of the cattle. It was a quiet life, the kind some people dreamed of, yet it carried a weight of its own. Samuel had chosen it deliberately, or perhaps it had chosen him. The land, the animals, and the routine of farm work were all he had ever really known. At 34, Samuel was a man shaped by labor and solitude. His hands were calloused from years of feeding, grooming, and caring for the animals. His face, weathered by sun and wind, told a story of endurance more than one of excitement or romance. Neighbors often commented on his quiet demeanor. A good man, they would say. A gentle soul, they would add. But some also whispered with a kind of pitying tone that he had never married, never had children, and had remained untouched by love or intimacy. Samuel did not mind their murmurs, though he sometimes wondered what they would say if they truly knew him. The ranch was his world, and it demanded much. Every day had its duties, from checking the fences to ensuring the cattle were healthy. There was always work to do, from early morning milking to repairing tools and equipment. The rhythm of the work brought a kind of peace, but also a relentless reminder of the solitary life he led. He ate alone at a small wooden table by the window, his meals simple and practical. He often paused to look out at the horizon, watching the sun rise over the fields, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In those moments, he sometimes allowed himself to dream. But Samuel's dreams were not of wild adventures or distant lands. They were quiet, personal wishes. He longed for someone who could sit with him in silence and understand him. Someone who could share not just the labor of life, but its small joys. The smell of fresh hay, the warmth of the sun on a crisp morning, the satisfaction of a fence well mended. He wanted a companion, a confidant, and yes, he sometimes admitted to himself, someone with whom he could share love and intimacy. Yet, for reasons he could not fully explain, that part of his life remained untouched. His friends, few though they were, often tried to nudge him toward the idea of meeting someone. At town gatherings or Sunday markets, he would listen politely as neighbors and acquaintances asked if he had found a partner. Samuel would smile, nod, and change the subject. He never lied. He simply never spoke about the longing he carried quietly in his heart. It was a part of him he had kept hidden, not out of shame, but out of habit. Years of solitude had made it easier to live with silence than to risk disappointment. Despite the calm routine, there was an undercurrent of loneliness that Samuel could not escape. Nights were the hardest. The ranch fell into stillness after sunset, and the wind whispered through the trees and across the open fields. Samuel would sit on the porch with a cup of strong tea, staring at the stars scattered across the night sky. He felt the absence of another human presence keenly in those hours. Sometimes he imagined the warmth of a hand in his, the sound of laughter echoing through the house, or even the simple comfort of shared conversation. These thoughts were fleeting, often dismissed by the first crack of dawn, but they were always there. Evenings at the ranch were a time for reflection. Samuel would often wander through the barns, checking on the animals before he finally allowed himself to rest. He enjoyed the companionship of his dog, Rusty, a faithful German shepherd who never left his side. Rusty's presence softened the edges of Samuel's solitude. The dog's playful energy reminded Samuel that companionship came in many forms, even if not the human kind he secretly yearned for. Yet, even with Rusty by his side, the ache for deeper connection remained. Samuel's life, while solitary, was not without its pleasures. He loved the work itself, the physicality, the challenge, the satisfaction of seeing the results of his labor. He took pride in the healthy cattle, the neat fences, and the orderly fields. There was a rhythm to the ranch, a dependable structure that provided him with purpose. But the human element, the warmth of shared experience, was missing. He sometimes wondered if he would ever experience the kind of closeness he saw in the couples who passed through town. His neighbors occasionally invited him to local events, fairs, or community dinners, and he would attend politely, though always feeling a little out of place. He watched as friends and strangers alike laughed, held hands, and shared stories, and he felt the sting of isolation. Not bitterness exactly, but a deep, quiet longing that he could not ignore. It was not that he envied others. He simply wanted to experience those moments for himself. He wanted a connection that went beyond friendship, a closeness that could warm the long, lonely nights. Yet Samuel was not unhappy. He had found contentment in his work, in the beauty of the land, and in the quiet predictability of life. There was a certain pride in being self-reliant, in knowing that he could manage the ranch alone, and in being capable of handling whatever challenges arose. But beneath that contentment lay a dormant part of him, a part that hoped for love, companionship, and intimacy. It was a secret he rarely acknowledged, even to himself, but it shaped his world in subtle ways. On a typical morning, Samuel would rise before the sun, feed the cattle, repair fences, and check on the crops. The hours were long and the work was never-ending, yet he embraced it fully. His hands, rough and calloused, were a testament to years of dedication. He took pride in every small victory, from a calf born healthy to a field that flourished under his care. And yet each night, as he settled into his simple bedroom, he felt the silence more acutely. The empty bed, the quiet rooms, the lack of human warmth, all of it reminded him of the life he had chosen, and the life he secretly longed for. Even as Samuel went about his daily routine, he held a cautious hope deep in his heart. He had seen love in the world around him, in neighbors, friends, and strangers passing through. He had glimpsed the joy of companionship, the comfort of shared laughter, and the intimacy of mutual understanding. And though he had never experienced it himself, he quietly believed that one day someone would come into his life and change it forever. He just did not yet know who or when that would happen, and so life on the ranch continued. Samuel rose with the sun, worked with dedication, and rested with satisfaction in a day well spent. He was a man of quiet resilience, shaped by solitude but not defeated by it. He carried with him a private longing, a hope that one day he might share his life, his home, and his heart with someone who truly understood him. Until then, he continued to live fully, embracing the work, the land, and the simple beauty of life, even as he quietly waited for the unexpected visitor who would change everything. Life on the ranch continued its usual rhythm, with Samuel rising before dawn, tending to the cattle and maintaining the fences. Yet one late summer morning, an unexpected presence quietly disrupted his routine. Clara arrived in the small town nearby, a widow traveling alone. She was in her early 30s, carrying a gentle strength beneath her soft exterior. Her eyes, though kind, held traces of sorrow, a reflection of a year spent navigating the grief of losing her husband. The town had been her first stop, and now she was seeking temporary lodging while she arranged matters related to her late husband's affairs. Samuel first noticed her at the local general store, where she hesitated by the shelves, studying a variety of items she needed for her journey. Her hair was loosely tied back, and her clothes, though neat, showed signs of long travel. Samuel, who had gone into town for supplies, offered a polite greeting. She smiled warmly, her presence brightening the quiet store. There was an immediate awareness between them, subtle yet undeniable, a recognition of two solitary souls navigating life in different ways, yet somehow understanding one another. After a short conversation, Samuel learned that Clara needed a place to stay. The ranch house was modest, with only a few rooms, but he offered her one. She expressed relief and gratitude, her voice soft but confident. This simple interaction marked the beginning of a delicate connection, one built not on grand gestures, but on small acts of kindness and understanding. Samuel showed her to the room, noticing the way she paused to take in her surroundings, appreciating the simplicity and warmth of the space. The first night, Clara settled in quietly. Samuel, accustomed to solitude, felt an unfamiliar nervousness. The presence of another person in his home stirred feelings he had not experienced in years. He was conscious of every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the soft rustle of curtains, even the subtle hum of the wind outside. For the first time in a long while, the house felt alive with human energy. He realized that companionship, even in its quietest form, could bring comfort and curiosity in equal measure. Over the next few days, Clara and Samuel navigated their new arrangement with care. She was self-sufficient but accepted his assistance when needed, whether it was fetching water, carrying groceries, or understanding the routines of the ranch. Samuel found himself learning about her life, about the woman she was beyond the grief she carried. She spoke with honesty and warmth, sharing stories of her childhood, her late husband, and the dreams she had once nurtured. In return, Samuel spoke of the ranch, of the long hours, and the quiet satisfaction of caring for the land and animals. Despite the initial awkwardness, a rhythm began to form between them. Mornings were spent in shared activity, feeding the animals, repairing fences, and tending to the crops. Afternoons brought quiet reflection, often side by side on the porch, where they could watch the sun move across the fields. The conversations were sometimes deep, sometimes light-hearted, but always meaningful. Samuel discovered that Clara had a natural curiosity and intelligence, and she, in turn, found his quiet strength and unwavering dedication admirable. Nights became a time of unexpected intimacy, not in physical terms but in emotional connection. In the small house, space was limited, and they shared a room out of necessity. At first, the situation felt unusual to Samuel. Sharing a room with a stranger, someone who was not family or friend, required careful adjustment. Yet as the nights passed, the initial discomfort gave way to comfort. They spoke in low voices, sharing thoughts, fears, and quiet laughter. The walls Samuel had built around his heart began to soften, one conversation at a time. Clara, too, found solace in Samuel's presence. Her grief had been heavy, isolating her from those around her. Here, on the ranch, she felt understood and accepted without judgment. Samuel's kindness was gentle, patient, and unobtrusive. He did not press her to speak of her loss, yet he was a steady listener when she chose to. She found herself drawn to his reliability and the quiet dignity with which he lived his life. The connection they formed was subtle, growing not from dramatic events, but from everyday acts of care and attention. As the days went on, Clara became more involved in ranch life. She learned the routines, helping where she could and observing where she could not. Samuel taught her the nuances of caring for the animals, mending fences, and managing the land. She appreciated his patience and the way he explained even the smallest details with care. Their partnership, though temporary, began to feel natural, as if they had always known how to navigate the space together. Meals were another time of connection. Sitting across from each other at the small wooden table, they shared food, conversation, and laughter. Clara's stories of her life before the ranch, and Samuel's tales of the quiet joys and challenges of farm work, created a sense of companionship neither had anticipated. They discovered shared values: honesty, hard work, resilience, and a deep appreciation for simple pleasures. In these moments, the foundation for trust and friendship was quietly cemented. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in warm hues of orange and pink, Samuel and Clara sat together on the porch. Rusty, Samuel's loyal dog, lay at their feet, content and calm. Clara leaned back, her gaze fixed on the distant hills, and Samuel noticed the soft smile that had formed on her face. For a moment, words were unnecessary. The silence between them was filled with understanding, with the acknowledgement that something meaningful was growing. Samuel felt a warmth he had never known, a sense of connection that went beyond mere friendship. During these days, Samuel began to see Clara not as a visitor or a stranger, but as a person who had quietly entered his life and changed it. He noticed the little things, the way she hummed softly while tending to the chores, the thoughtful pauses before she spoke, and the way her presence seemed to bring light into the corners of his home. Her laughter, rare but genuine, echoed through the rooms, and Samuel found himself smiling more often than he had in years. Clara also began to notice Samuel in ways she had not expected. The quiet strength he displayed, the care with which he approached every task, and the honesty of his words drew her closer. She found comfort in his predictability, yet also a sense of intrigue in the depth of his character. He was a man of few words, but every word he spoke carried weight. She admired his integrity, his dedication, and the gentle manner in which he treated both people and animals alike. As the week progressed, a subtle tension grew, an unspoken awareness of feelings neither fully understood nor yet named. The emotional intimacy they shared was deepening, yet they approached it with caution, respecting each other's boundaries. There was no rush, no pressure, only the quiet unfolding of connection. Each night brought them closer, not through dramatic gestures but through shared understanding, shared silence, and the comforting presence of someone who truly listened. One particularly quiet evening, a storm rolled over the fields, bringing sudden rain and strong winds. Samuel and Clara sat by the window, watching the rain streak across the glass. The cozy room, the soft glow of the lamp, and the sound of the storm outside created a sense of safety and togetherness. Clara rested her head on Samuel's shoulder, and he felt a surge of protectiveness and care he had never experienced before. The moment was fleeting but significant, a gentle acknowledgement of the bond growing between them. By the end of Clara's stay, though she had not yet left, Samuel realized that his life had begun to change. The quiet routine of the ranch, once solely his own, had been infused with warmth, companionship, and the subtle excitement of emotional intimacy. Clara's presence had illuminated aspects of life he had long ignored. The joy of connection, the comfort of shared experiences, and the possibility of love and understanding. Though they had not crossed into physical intimacy, the emotional closeness they developed during these days laid the groundwork for something deeper. Samuel had discovered that true connection was not instant. It was nurtured through patience, shared moments, and mutual respect. Clara had reminded him that vulnerability could be met with kindness, and that opening one's heart did not always lead to pain. As Samuel watched Clara move about the ranch, tending to her tasks with quiet determination, he felt gratitude and anticipation. Life had brought him an unexpected visitor, and with her, the possibility of change, growth, and perhaps love. He did not know what the future held, but he felt ready to embrace it, ready to explore the connection that had slowly, gently, and inevitably blossomed over the past week. And so, the ranch, once a place of solitude and routine, became a landscape of possibilities. The presence of another human being had introduced complexity, warmth, and hope. Samuel's heart, long dormant and untouched, was beginning to awaken. The quiet rhythm of work, shared tasks, and evening conversations had transformed his life in subtle, profound ways. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine that love, understanding, and emotional intimacy were not just distant dreams, but real experiences waiting to unfold, right there on his ranch, beside the widow who had quietly entered his life. The days passed quietly, yet something in the air had shifted. Samuel noticed it first in the subtle changes of routine. A shared smile over breakfast, a casual brush of hands while passing a tool, and the way Clara lingered by the doorway before leaving for small errands. These small moments, once unnoticed in the rhythm of everyday life, now carried weight and meaning. Samuel, who had spent years in solitude, was beginning to recognize feelings he had never fully understood. The presence of another person in his daily life was awakening a gentle curiosity within him, a curiosity about connection, about trust, and about the warmth of companionship. As evening fell one day, a sudden summer storm rolled over the fields. Heavy clouds obscured the fading sunlight, and the first drops of rain pattered against the roof. The wind rustled through the trees, shaking loose leaves that danced across the yard. Clara, who had been checking the fences for the approaching rain, hurried inside, her hair damp and her cheeks flushed from the exertion. Samuel offered her a towel, and when she accepted, their hands brushed. It was a fleeting contact, but Samuel felt a jolt he could not ignore. The sensation, both startling and strangely comforting, lingered far longer than the touch itself. The storm forced them indoors, and the ranch house suddenly felt smaller, cozier, and alive in a way Samuel had never experienced. He and Clara settled by the fireplace, the warmth of the flames contrasting with the cool, damp air outside. Conversation flowed easily, starting with mundane topics: the storm, the day's work, and the unpredictable weather. Yet gradually, the dialogue deepened, touching on memories, dreams, and fears. Clara spoke of her late husband with quiet honesty, of the love they had shared and the emptiness that followed his passing. Samuel listened attentively, offering empathy, support, and silent acknowledgement of her grief. Over the course of the evening, their interaction became more intimate, not through words alone, but through shared presence. They laughed softly at little anecdotes, exchanged glances that conveyed understanding without speech, and felt the comfort of being near someone who truly saw them. Samuel realized that intimacy was not only physical, it was emotional, built on trust, patience, and shared vulnerability. Clara, in turn, felt the calm strength of Samuel's company, the reassurance of a man who listened without judgment and who valued her presence simply because she was there. That night, they prepared for bed. Samuel noticed his own hesitations, a careful awareness of proximity and space that he had rarely considered before. The house was small, and the only available bed for Clara was in the same room where he slept. At first, both felt awkward, unsure of how to navigate the unfamiliar situation. Yet, there was no rush, no pressure, only a quiet acknowledgement that their connection had grown deeper than either had anticipated. They arranged themselves respectfully, each aware of the other's comfort, and allowed the night to pass gently, with the sounds of the storm outside as a lullaby. The first night set a tone for the following days. Conversations continued late into the night, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in comfortable silence. Samuel discovered that he enjoyed these moments more than he had imagined. They were a time of reflection, of honest communication, and of emotional closeness. Clara shared her thoughts on life, on loss, and on the subtle beauty she found in everyday moments. Samuel, in turn, opened up about his life on the ranch, his solitude, and the quiet longing he had carried for years. These exchanges, though simple, were profound in their effect. By the second night, a new sense of familiarity had developed. Samuel no longer felt the awkwardness of sharing space. Instead, he felt a protective and nurturing instinct toward Clara. He noticed the way she moved, the softness in her expressions, and the quiet resilience that had brought her this far in life. Their conversations delved into more personal territory, hopes for the future, regrets of the past, and small secrets that had never been shared with anyone else. Each confession, each smile, and each gesture strengthened their bond, creating a sense of intimacy grounded in trust rather than expectation. During these nights, Samuel became aware of feelings he had long ignored. The solitude that had once defined him now felt incomplete without Clara's presence. He realized that emotional closeness could stir desires he had never fully acknowledged. These desires were not merely physical, they were tied to the connection, the shared experiences, and the recognition that another person truly cared for him. Clara, too, recognized this subtle shift, though she approached it with caution, respecting Samuel's pace and space. Even daily routines were transformed by their growing connection. Tasks that had once felt solitary, like feeding the cattle or mending fences, now carried a sense of partnership. They worked side by side, offering help and encouragement, sharing laughter and sometimes quiet reflection. Samuel observed how Clara approached the work with determination, patience, and thoughtfulness. He admired her independence and her willingness to engage fully in life, even while carrying her grief. These qualities made him feel both respect and deep affection for her. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, they took a brief break from chores and sat together on the porch. Rusty, Samuel's dog, lay at their feet, content and watchful. The air was warm, carrying the scent of hay and rain-soaked earth. Clara leaned back, and Samuel noticed the subtle relaxation in her posture, the calm trust she exhibited in his presence. In that quiet moment, he realized that intimacy was not defined by grand gestures or words. It was present in shared silence, in the ease of being together, and in the feeling of safety and acceptance. By the third night, their connection had reached a natural climax of emotional closeness. They spoke of dreams they had never shared with anyone else, fears they had kept hidden, and small personal truths that revealed the depth of their character. Samuel felt a profound sense of awakening, a recognition that love and companionship could arrive in forms he had never imagined. Clara, in turn, found a quiet liberation in his presence, a reminder that human connection could be gentle, nurturing, and deeply fulfilling. Throughout these 3 nights, Samuel discovered aspects of himself that had remained dormant for decades. He realized that emotional vulnerability was not weakness, but strength. He learned that desires could be expressed safely through trust and honesty. He recognized the value of patience, of allowing connections to grow naturally, and of embracing the warmth that came from simply being with someone who understood him. Clara's presence illuminated these truths, and together they explored the subtleties of companionship, trust, and mutual care. Though physical intimacy had not yet become part of their relationship, the nights were transformative. Samuel experienced an awakening not only of emotional closeness, but also of self-awareness. He understood that his heart had room for connection, that his capacity for love had not diminished, and that intimacy could be gentle, respectful, and deeply personal. Clara, through her kindness and openness, had provided him with the space to explore these feelings safely. Their bond, forged over these 3 nights, was not a sudden explosion of passion but a slow, deliberate unfolding of understanding. It was built on shared experiences, honest conversations, and the comfort of proximity. Samuel realized that the anticipation, the small gestures, and the quiet moments of connection were as meaningful as any physical expression of intimacy. The emotional depth they had reached created a foundation of trust and affection that could guide their future interactions. By the end of the third night, as dawn broke over the fields and the first light of morning illuminated the ranch, Samuel felt a profound sense of gratitude. The 3 nights had transformed his life in subtle but enduring ways. He had discovered the importance of emotional closeness, the joy of shared experiences, and the awakening of desires he had long suppressed. Clara's presence had introduced warmth, understanding, and hope into a life that had been quiet, predictable, and solitary for too long. As he watched Clara rise with the sun, preparing for the day's chores, Samuel felt a quiet excitement mixed with a deep calm. Life on the ranch had not changed in its routine, but everything had shifted in meaning. He had discovered that companionship could arrive unexpectedly, that emotional intimacy could awaken desires, and that love was not always about grand gestures. It was about understanding, patience, and presence. The 3 nights had been a gentle awakening, a reminder that human connection was a vital part of life, and that opening one's heart could lead to profound transformation. And so, Samuel faced the day with a new perspective. The ranch, the animals, and the work remained constants in his life, but the presence of Clara had brought something new: awareness, emotional depth, and the quiet thrill of connection. He had discovered that life could be richer, fuller, and more meaningful when shared with someone who understood and cared for him. The 3 nights had set the stage for a journey that was only beginning, a journey of growth, understanding, and the slow blossoming of love in its gentlest and most profound form. The mornings on the ranch had never felt so alive. Samuel woke before dawn as usual, but now there was a subtle excitement in the air. It was not just the routine of work that pulled him out of bed. It was the thought of Clara, her presence in the house, and the quiet bond they had formed over the past few days. The ranch, with its familiar sights and sounds, seemed different somehow, infused with warmth and possibility. The animals greeted him as usual, but their presence felt less solitary. With Clara nearby, even the simplest moments carried a new meaning. As the days went on, Samuel began to notice the smallest details about Clara. The way she tied her hair back before feeding the cattle, the careful attention she gave to every task, the softness in her voice when she spoke of something that mattered to her. These small observations, once unremarkable, now held weight. He found himself drawn to her thoughtfulness, her patience, and the quiet strength that had carried her through loss. It was not just admiration. It was a growing sense of affection, a recognition that someone had entered his life in a way that no one else ever had. Clara, too, noticed changes in Samuel. The way his eyes lingered on her as she moved through the chores, the subtle protectiveness in his gestures, and the gentle warmth in his tone. She saw a man who had lived a quiet, solitary life, yet who was capable of deep feeling and careful attention. She sensed his hesitations, his unspoken desires, and the way he was beginning to embrace vulnerability. For her, it was a reminder that healing and new beginnings could arrive unexpectedly, in the form of someone patient, understanding, and wholly present. One afternoon, as they worked together repairing a fence near the edge of the pasture, Samuel felt an urge to share more of himself than he ever had with anyone else. He spoke of his childhood, growing up on the ranch, and the quiet lessons the land had taught him. He admitted that he had lived most of his life in solitude, not because he wished it, but because he had not known how to open himself to others. Clara listened without interruption, offering smiles, nods, and the occasional question that encouraged him to continue. The openness between them grew stronger with each passing moment, creating a sense of intimacy that neither had anticipated. That evening, as they prepared supper together in the small kitchen, Samuel realized that he was beginning to understand his own heart in ways he never had before. He noticed the warmth he felt in Clara's presence, the comfort of her laughter, and the security of knowing she was there. It was not simply friendship. It was something deeper, something that stirred a sense of desire, connection, and emotional fulfillment. For the first time in years, Samuel allowed himself to consider that he might experience love, affection, and intimacy, not as distant dreams, but as real possibilities in his life. The nights became moments of reflection and quiet learning. Samuel discovered that intimacy was as much about understanding and care as it was about physical closeness. Lying in the room they shared, he felt a sense of awakening, realizing that he could be open, gentle, and attentive. Clara, through her quiet patience and understanding, had created a safe space for him to explore these feelings. Each conversation, each gesture, and each shared smile strengthened the bond between them, revealing layers of connection that were both comforting and transformative. As their emotional intimacy deepened, Samuel began to recognize the desires that had remained dormant for decades. These were not simply physical urges. They were desires for closeness, trust, and shared experience. He wanted to hold someone in his arms, to share warmth, and to experience the quiet joy of being truly understood. Clara, in turn, acknowledged these subtle shifts with sensitivity, allowing him to grow into these feelings at his own pace. There was no rush, no pressure, only the slow, natural unfolding of connection and affection. The ranch, once a place of routine and solitude, became a canvas for their shared moments. Mornings spent feeding the animals, afternoons repairing fences, and evenings by the fireplace took on new significance. Samuel began to see the beauty in these small, everyday tasks, not just for their practical purpose, but for the opportunity to share them with Clara. He noticed how her presence transformed ordinary chores into experiences filled with laughter, conversation, and mutual support. Every glance, every word, every gesture carried meaning and strengthened the emotional bond forming between them. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the fields. The sky glowed with shades of pink and gold, and the breeze carried the sweet scent of hay and earth. Rusty lay at their feet, content and calm. Samuel turned to Clara, his voice soft but earnest, and spoke of the gratitude he felt for her presence in his life. Clara smiled, her eyes reflecting the fading light, and thanked him for welcoming her, for sharing his world, and for allowing her to feel at home. In that moment, they both realized that their connection was something rare and precious, built on trust, understanding, and mutual respect. As the days continued, Samuel began to explore his feelings more openly. He discovered that he could express affection without fear, that vulnerability was not a weakness, and that genuine connection brought strength. He learned to notice Clara's moods, to respond to her needs, and to offer comfort in ways both small and meaningful. Clara, too, felt the depth of his care and attentiveness, realizing that the bond they shared was more profound than she had anticipated. Their connection was not born from necessity or circumstance alone. It was nurtured through deliberate acts of kindness, honesty, and emotional presence. During these days, Samuel also reflected on his own past and the choices that had led him to this point. He realized that his solitude had not been a punishment, but a preparation, a way to understand himself, his values, and his capacity for care. Now, with Clara in his life, he saw how his experiences could inform a new chapter, one filled with emotional richness, shared moments, and the possibility of love. He embraced this understanding with quiet determination, recognizing that life had a way of surprising even those who believed they were set in their ways. By the fourth night, their relationship had reached a point of quiet maturity. They shared thoughts, fears, and dreams late into the evening, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in laughter. Samuel realized that he was capable of opening his heart fully, without hesitation or fear. Clara had taught him that trust could be given safely, that care could be mutual, and that love could be gentle, patient, and respectful. He understood that these nights were not simply a passing phase, but a transformative period in which he discovered new depths of himself and his capacity to connect with another person. One particularly quiet night, as the wind whispered through the trees and the stars shone brightly above the ranch, Samuel felt a profound sense of clarity. He realized that life was not merely about routine, labor, or solitude. It was about connection, understanding, and the courage to open one's heart. He turned to Clara, noticing the calm confidence in her expression, and felt a surge of gratitude. She had entered his life unexpectedly, yet her presence had reshaped it in ways he could never have predicted. The nights they had shared had awakened desires, emotional understanding, and a sense of hope that had long been dormant. As dawn approached, Samuel reflected on the changes within himself. He had learned that intimacy was more than physical closeness. It was about being present, attentive, and emotionally available. He had discovered that vulnerability could lead to profound connection, and that opening one's heart to another person could bring unexpected joy. Clara's presence had illuminated these truths, guiding him gently towards self-awareness, understanding, and emotional growth. By the end of this period, Samuel no longer saw himself as the solitary rancher, untouched by life's deeper connections. He recognized that his emotional awakening was a turning point, a chance to embrace the fullness of human experience. Clara's time in his life, though temporary, had provided him with the courage to explore feelings he had long denied, to recognize his desires, and to understand the importance of mutual care and affection. The lessons he had learned during these nights would shape him for years to come, guiding him toward richer, more fulfilling relationships. Life on the ranch returned to its familiar rhythm, but Samuel carried a new awareness. The mornings, chores, and evenings were the same in routine, yet entirely different in meaning. He had discovered that emotional intimacy could transform the ordinary into the extraordinary, that trust and care could awaken desires long suppressed, and that love and connection could arrive when least expected. With Clara's presence, he had learned that opening his heart was not only possible but profoundly rewarding. And so, Samuel faced each day with a quiet confidence, embracing the lessons of the past nights and the awareness that his life had changed. The ranch remained his home, the animals his companions, and the work his pride, but his heart had been awakened. He had discovered that emotional intimacy, understanding, and mutual care were not abstract concepts, but real, lived experiences that could enrich life in ways he had never imagined. Clara's influence had been transformative, and Samuel knew that the journey of self-discovery and emotional growth was only beginning. The days began quietly after Clara's arrival in the town had ended. Samuel awoke each morning as usual, the sunlight spilling across the fields, the cattle lowing softly in the distance, and Rusty padding along the porch beside him. Yet, the ranch now felt different, filled with memories of shared moments and quiet laughter. Clara's presence had been brief, only a matter of days, but the impact on Samuel was profound. He could feel the change in himself, an awakening of heart and mind that he had never experienced before. The morning after her departure, he walked through the barn slowly, noticing how different the place seemed without her around. He remembered her careful hands tending to the animals, her gentle voice encouraging Rusty when he barked, and the way she had paused to appreciate the small things, like the sunlight glinting off the fence posts or the scent of fresh hay. Samuel realized that the house, the ranch, and even the work he had once done in quiet routine were now imbued with new meaning because of her influence. He felt gratitude for the time they had shared and the lessons he had learned. Though Clara had left, their conversations, her laughter, and the warmth of her presence lingered in his mind. Samuel discovered that the true gift of companionship was not only in the physical presence of another person, but in the way they could illuminate parts of ourselves we had never known. He recalled the evenings spent talking by the fireplace, the quiet moments of understanding, and the shared glances that spoke more than words ever could. These memories were now treasures, shaping his heart and perspective. The ranch itself seemed to echo with lessons from those few days. Samuel began to approach his work differently, not merely as tasks to be completed, but as opportunities to reflect and carry forward the sense of connection he had experienced. Each fence he repaired, each animal he fed, and each corner of the fields he walked through reminded him of the conversations, laughter, and quiet understanding he had shared with Clara. Work was no longer solitary. It was part of the life he had begun to see as richer and fuller because of human connection. Samuel also reflected on his own growth. He had learned that vulnerability was not a weakness, but a strength. He had discovered that opening his heart, even cautiously, could lead to understanding, trust, and genuine affection. For the first time, he felt confident in his ability to connect with another person, to express care, and to accept care in return. The awareness of his own feelings and desires had become clearer, and he knew that these lessons would guide him for the rest of his life. In the evenings, he would sit on the porch, gazing at the setting sun, and recall the simple, meaningful moments spent with Clara. He remembered how she had smiled at the sight of a young calf exploring the pasture, how she had asked questions about his life, and how she had listened to his stories without judgment or interruption. These memories brought a quiet warmth to his heart, a reassurance that connection, even brief, could leave a lasting imprint. He realized that life's most valuable experiences often arrived unexpectedly, and that they could transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. Samuel also began to notice a subtle shift in the way he interacted with others. He became more open in conversation, more willing to listen, and more willing to express appreciation for those around him. The emotional growth he had experienced with Clara extended beyond the ranch, influencing his relationships with neighbors, friends, and even strangers passing through town. He carried with him a newfound empathy, understanding, and patience, a quiet reminder that human connection was both a gift and a responsibility. Though he was alone on the ranch once more, Samuel no longer felt the ache of solitude as he once had. The bond he had shared with Clara had taught him that emotional closeness, understanding, and mutual care could exist in many forms. He could carry the lessons, the warmth, and the awareness of love within him, even without another person present. Life had not returned to its old routine. It had expanded, enriched by experience, reflection, and the awakening of heart. As the weeks passed, Samuel found himself thinking about the future with a new sense of hope. He recognized that life was full of unexpected opportunities for connection and growth. The memories of Clara's stay reminded him that relationships could be gentle, respectful, and deeply meaningful. He began to imagine the possibility of meeting someone else in the future, someone with whom he could share his life, work, and dreams. Unlike before, these thoughts no longer carried fear or hesitation. They carried excitement, anticipation, and confidence in his own capacity to love and be loved. Samuel also reflected on the power of small moments. He realized that intimacy and connection were not defined solely by grand gestures or long-term commitments, but by the quiet acts of care, attention, and presence. A shared smile, a meaningful conversation, or a simple act of kindness could create bonds that were just as important as those built over years. Clara had shown him that emotional depth could be found in the everyday, and Samuel began to embrace this perspective fully, carrying it forward into all aspects of his life. Even the ranch animals seemed to sense the change in him. Rusty remained his faithful companion, but Samuel noticed how the dog responded to his calmer, more confident energy. The cattle seemed less restless, moving through the fields with ease, as if mirroring the subtle balance Samuel now felt within himself. It was a reminder that connection extended beyond human relationships, and that care, attention, and presence could transform the entire environment around him. As summer drew to a close, Samuel took a long walk across the fields, reflecting on the days with Clara and the ways he had grown. He thought about the emotional awakening he had experienced, the lessons of vulnerability, and the recognition that love and companionship were not distant or unattainable. The ranch, once a place of quiet solitude, now felt like a living, breathing testament to the richness of life, shaped not only by hard work but by connection, understanding, and shared humanity. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Samuel stood on the porch and allowed himself a moment of gratitude. He thought of Clara, of the 3 nights that had brought emotional intimacy and awakening, and of the gentle influence she had left on his life. He realized that love and connection could arrive in unexpected ways, that human bonds could transform even the quietest life, and that personal growth often came from embracing vulnerability and openness. From that day forward, Samuel continued his life on the ranch with renewed purpose. He still rose with the sun, tended to his animals and repaired fences, but he did so with a heart that had been awakened. He approached each task with mindfulness, each interaction with attention, and each quiet moment with awareness of the richness that life offered. The experience with Clara had shown him that life could be deeply fulfilling, even in solitude, when one carried the lessons of emotional connection and understanding. Though Clara was no longer present, the influence of her visit remained. Samuel carried her lessons in his heart, shaping the way he lived, worked, and interacted with the world. He had discovered that true intimacy was about more than physical presence. It was about understanding, empathy, patience, and care. He had learned that opening one's heart, even cautiously, could lead to profound personal growth and joy. By the end of that season, Samuel felt a quiet contentment. He was still the diligent rancher who rose before dawn, cared for the land, and managed his animals with unwavering dedication. Yet he was also a man transformed by experience, emotionally awakened and capable of deep connection. The time he had spent with Clara, brief though it was, had left an enduring mark on his heart and mind, guiding him toward a future filled with hope, understanding, and the possibility of love. And so, life continued on the ranch, steady and predictable in routine, yet rich with meaning and personal growth. Samuel no longer viewed solitude as a limitation, but as a canvas upon which the lessons of connection, trust, and emotional intimacy could be painted. He had learned that love, in all its forms, could arrive unexpectedly, that vulnerability could lead to strength, and that shared human experience could transform even the quietest life into something extraordinary. With the setting sun casting a warm glow over the fields, Samuel stood on the porch, Rusty at his side, and allowed himself to feel a deep sense of peace. He was no longer simply a solitary rancher. He was a man who had discovered the depth of his own heart, the value of emotional connection, and the enduring power of human kindness. Life on the ranch would continue, as it always had, but Samuel carried with him a new awareness, a quiet hope, and the knowledge that love and understanding could arrive in the most unexpected of ways, leaving a lasting and beautiful impact on the soul.